And with that, I would like to welcome everyone that is now joining in to this DEI webinar on inclusive leadership in chemistry and beyond. Thank you very much for your interest. Last year, when we planned this project, the world was still different. And we asked our community, what do you want to talk about? What shall we highlight? And it was inclusive leadership that they wanted to highlight. And this was way before Trump was voted in. And then we see this massive attack on inclusion, diversity, and equity in America and beyond. So I think this could be not more important to highlight this topic today. And with that, my team members, Julio and Carlos, who are also the leaders of the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Committee at the International Younger Chemistry Network, are really delighted to welcome four amazing panelists with us. And I will just briefly introduce them to you before I will let them speak for themselves. So with us today is Tricia Breen Carmichael from the University of Windsor, as well as Ghazaleh Tabatabai, professor not only in medicine, but also neuroscience. And she is with us from the University of Tübingen, working in the clinic there. Then we have Professor Carlos Romero-Nieto, who's joining us from the University of Castilla-La Mancha in Spain. And then we have Professor David Smith, who's joining us from the UK. And I would like to give you a brief overview how we're going to do this event today. So we have a bit of a tough schedule with a 60-minute webinar format where within the first 30 minutes, we will have short impulse presentations from our panelists, where they will briefly talk about one aspect of inclusive leadership that is dear to their heart or that they think is important to stress. Then we will dive into a panel discussion where you are all welcome to share your questions. This can be done in two ways, and you can already start doing this now, either by putting your questions into the chat. Please feel free to do that, and we will moderate this. Or you can also raise your hand and unmute yourself to openly communicate with our speakers. I would like to briefly tell you the speaking order we're going to hear our panelists talk today. So first, Tricia will start, followed by David, and then Ghazaleh and Carlos. Let me quickly highlight Tricia's past in academia before I'm sure she will dive much more into inclusive leadership. So she's a professor at the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry at the University of Windsor in Canada. And her research focus is on stretchable electronics, particularly wearables. She obtained both her undergrad and her PhD at the University of Windsor, after which she had several postdoc stays at the MIT as well as the Harvard University before returning to the University of Windsor, first as a lecturer and then as a professor. And with that, I would like to cordially welcome you, Tricia, to share your perspective on inclusive leadership.
Thank you so much, Anna. I'm going to share my screen. I have a few slides, so let me know. Does that look good? Okay. Well, thank you so much for the invitation. I just want to take a few minutes to kind of talk about my view of inclusive leadership and tell you a little bit about myself at the same time. So I think one of the biggest barriers in science is that we have this mythology that scientists are somehow these special people who are different from everyone else. So when you read someone's biography or even listen to the biography you just heard about me, you hear something that's very highly idealized. You hear about, people who work 100-hour weeks and they have, these big moments of, eureka discoveries, and their scientific work is more important than anything else. And most critically here is they always seem to have had everything all figured out. Their path was completely known to them. And the problem with this is none of that is actually the truth. This is marketing, right? This is like just part of what you see. And so why this keeps people out is that students read, biographies, or they hear about different scientists, and they leave science because they can't live up to something that truly is impossible. Or maybe worse, spend their careers trying to and end up feeling fairly unhappy. So science is done by regular people with real stories and real challenges. And I think it's really important to talk about that. And that's why I'm open to sharing my own story and how I kind of try to invite people in to be part of science. And so many of you might be familiar with the iceberg illusion if you're into DEI or EDI. The iceberg illusion is same thing as on social media, right? You see these perfect lives, it's perfect things. But underneath, that's just the tip of the iceberg, of course. And underneath, what you don't see is all of the, the failures, the sacrifice, things that we all commonly experience as researchers, especially failure. Um, and so it's important to acknowledge and really talk about this stuff that's under the surface. And so I just want to take a couple minutes to tell you a little bit about my personal iceberg. So this is the tip of my iceberg. If you are looking at this, you see famous places, MIT, Harvard. I worked at IBM for a while at IBM Research. I'm editor-in-chief of a journal. I've won some medals for my work. I mean, I've had scholarships throughout my career. And if you read my bio, and looking at the slide, you're forming opinions about me right now. But that's not who I am. So who I am really is underneath the tip of the iceberg, all of the things that we all struggle with. This is, common, but for me, I've always struggled for my entire life with insomnia. I have anxiety, I have depression, and I was ultimately diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, which comes from trauma. So that is a sort of condensed version of who I am. That my brain is different. It's wired differently, and that is a result of trauma. And so that kind of exacerbates some things for me that we all also experience. Overthinking, is this a good project, or and then you kind of can't get going. Self-doubt, feeling isolated. And I also experience stress inflammation, which is when your body actually expresses your feelings because you're having trouble dealing with them. So you have physiological symptoms. And other things like imposter syndrome, right? Feeling like you don't belong. All of these things too are made worse by being a minority, being a woman in science. And so that's like really who I am. And I'm very open about talking about it because I think it's important to know that, you can have all of these struggles, you can still be a scientist, you can still participate. And sorry, there's the last part here is the experiencing burnout. And then also, it's very important to say, I've been in therapy for, 20 years, maybe a little bit more. Therapy has been really helpful to me. I'm also very open about talking about therapy, taking medications for mental health. I think it's important that we normalize these things and remove the stigma because so many of us, struggle with these things. So I've thought about this and reflected on it a fair bit. I had never told anyone about my mental health struggles at all because of the stigma until 2020 or 2021 when I published a blog article on the Voices of Academia blog, which is a mental health website, where I told my story. And it was terrifying to do. And I got a lot of really positive feedback from people, though, saying that they needed to hear this, that they were grateful that somebody could talk about it. And here it's important to acknowledge that I have the privilege to be able to do that. I'm a full professor. I have tenure. I am promoted. There's no more promotions. So I can do this. Other people may not feel comfortable at their career stage being able to do that. So as part of sort of my process here, I've broadened my own personal needs to be successful in science beyond the journal covers and things like that. I was a co-organizer and co-founder of the first LGBTQ plus STEM in science, the conference in Canada. This was the first of its kind. It was one of my greatest achievements, in my opinion, and one of the most joyful things I've done. And I also want to just, as a final note, say the things that you do to create inclusive spaces don't have to be big actions, right? Organizing a conference or putting yourself out there on, on the internet with your personal story. Those are big things. But other things I've done have also had real impact. So this is a photograph of my office door, and I put a sticker of, a safe space sticker. And I have other things in my office like that. And those things make a difference too. So if you're not in a position to sort of put yourself out there, there are things you can do that are small things, but still impactful. And I think that that's the way that we can all contribute to being inclusive. And I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing this very personal insight, Tricia. And if you're already having questions for Tricia specifically, please put them in the chat as we will continue with our impulses. And I would like to briefly introduce the academic part of Dave. So Professor David Smith is a professor for chemistry at the University of York in England, with a research focus on nanochemistry as well as self-assembling nanomaterials. And he actually obtained his undergrad as well as graduate his PhD at the University of Oxford before he did his postdoctoral research in the lab of François Dietrich. Already in just before 2000, he was appointed lecturer at York. In 2006, he received his professorship at the University of
Do I
York.
smell if I walk past you?
What?
Do I smell if I walk past you?
I will just mute that person, sorry.
No.
I'm excuse this interruption with Zoom, unfortunately. Dave, the stage is yours. Please share your insight with us.
Thanks, Anna. I don't have any slides like Tricia. She gave a lovely introduction to things. I also want to share my non-idealized biography, how I've experienced life, I guess, as much as chemistry, and how DAI has helped me, and how I've tried to perhaps change the culture a little bit and things that you can do. So as a young gay scientist in the 1990s, I found really nobody like me around. It was a challenging time to be gay. There was the back end of the HIV/AIDS crisis still at that time. And I didn't come out. I didn't really explore that part of my personality at all as a young scientist. I did all those throw myself into my work things and hiding away that I think lots of young LGBT plus scientists do. And actually, if I look back on it, I feel that the first 10 years after I left home, there were so many missed opportunities in life, partly because of what the scientific atmosphere was like at those times. And I didn't really fully come out until I was in my mid-30s, working as an academic in York. And interestingly, it was partly because students had commented that the department had a homophobic atmosphere, and there was gossip about me that they'd heard and that they didn't like it. They felt it was homophobic, and they wanted to transform the atmosphere. So it was a student-led intervention. And it encouraged me to be more involved in top-down change, as well as encouraging bottom-up change from the students. And I think that in the 15 years since, my department's become one of the most LGBT plus friendly chemistry departments, probably globally, certainly in the UK. And it really made me believe in how you can change things bottom-up and top-down. I've always believed since then that people can't really be someone unless they can see someone like them. And that led to perhaps what I'd call my first wave of activism, centered around being a gay scientist, being a role model, although I don't like the word. But role models matter because people can't shout down real people. If you have a real trans person or gay person talking about their life experiences, it's very hard to use those anti-gay or anti-trans talking points against them, because they're a person, they're an individual. So role models, particularly those of us who have that power, who have that tenured position, like Tricia said, really should stand up and talk for those things. And in the process, I've changed quite a lot of local practices. I've made videos, given lectures, written articles, worked with professional bodies to produce support packages for LGBT plus people in the workplace, run the biggest LGBT plus survey of physical scientists in the UK. So there's lots of things you can do if you want to get involved in trying to drive change. And honestly, I thought that part of the work was partly done. But then along come Trump and the Reform Party in the UK, and Alternative for Deutschland in Germany. And I can see that progress can very easily be snatched away, and there's a lot more to do. I think the second bit of what I wanted to talk about was something I've spoken about a bit less, and it intersects with that first bit, but it is something else that's important in inclusive leadership. I met my partner in 2005, and he had cystic fibrosis. In 2011, he needed a lung transplant, and I took quite a lot of leave to be with him. After that, his health was great, and in 2014, we became adoptive parents, and we flexed adoption leave between us through that period. And then sadly, he got a rare form of transplant rejection, actually, and in 2019, he died. And so there was a period where I acted as his carer, and now, of course, I'm a single parent to our son. My son has some very significant additional needs with autism and ADHD. He isn't able to be schooled in mainstream school, so he's in specialist education. And really throughout that period, I've worked part-time flexi, and that means I tend to work close to full-time when he's in school. And then in school holidays, I work almost not at all. And academia is quite a privileged position to work in because those kinds of things are possible to achieve. And inclusive leadership makes those things possible for people in our teams. I've supervised people who are moms to children and dads to children. A single mom I supervised in my team, and we worked very flexibly together to make sure she could successfully graduate her PhD. And I think what I've learned from that phase of my life is how important it is that careers should be flexible. And not all careers have the same shape. There might be people who take lots of time out of their career early in their career, bringing up a young family. There might be people who have to care for elderly parents a bit later, perhaps in middle of career, or things happen like a partner dying to me, and perhaps more middle to senior career. You need that flexibility. And this idea that your career is going to be that perfect trajectory, going up through the grad school, going up to be a postdoc, getting that academic position, winning this prize, this prize, this prize, and going on. Real careers aren't like that. And inclusive leadership acknowledges that and then supports people to be the best they can be. If people are talented scientists, they should be able to contribute even if the shape of their career is not that traditional perfect shape. And I want to do a lot more in that space around caring, disability, and parenthood. Currently, I don't really have the time and the energy, but this is a little step towards trying to do that. And again, like Tricia, I'll be happy to answer questions later on as well.
Yeah, Dave, thank you for sharing your family story. And as a parent myself, I can only feel with you. And thank you for opening up in this community. And I think this is such an important point to talk about what it means to have family and care responsibilities. And I'm very much looking forward to the questions for Dave as well. So please feel free to already put them in the chat for later. And with that, I would like to change to our next panelist, Professor Dr. Ghazaleh Tabatabai, who is not only a clinician, but also a scientist. And she is a professor for neuro-oncology at the University of Tübingen. She's the medical director of the Department of Neurology with a focus on neuro-oncology. And she's working on neuro-oncology, personalized medicine, and clinical neuroscience. In her training, she did her clinical doctor at the University of Düsseldorf, followed by the scientific doctor at the PhD at the University of Tübingen, and has been a board-certified neurologist since 2008. Already in 2014, she took on her professorship in neuro-oncology and became the medical director in 2019. And she's taking on several other leadership roles, such as most recently the chair of the Deutsche Forschungsgesellschaft Board in Neuroscience. Dear Ghazaleh, I'm very much looking forward to your inputs, and please feel free to share your insight now as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anna, and thank you so much, Tricia and David, for starting with this very inspiring introductions. Basically, I have prepared, some other slides, but now I have briefly, you know, switched because this made me think of some other aspects that I think will be relevant. So probably to start with, you know, when we talk about inclusive leadership, you know, for me, in essence, it's basically a question of empathy and the question of really open communication. Because it's always, and we heard that nicely, you have to consider every person has a story behind this person and a package to carry somehow. And you never know whether the package that this person has is somehow either something facilitating the journey or even probably holding this person back from a journey. And I think as leaders, our responsibility is to basically empower our co-workers, our team members, and this includes reflecting on potential packages that these people might have, and this might basically prevent them from really reaching their full potential. What we have also heard very nicely from Tricia and Dave is basically, or what I would like to make a point is, I think particularly in academia, and let's say particularly, you know, as a parent, or particularly, you know, as a woman, or particularly as, you know, being considered a minority somewhere, I think it's always very important also to think about how you develop resilience and how you learn to take care of yourself. And in that regard, I have actually one slide that I would like to share with you, if that works right now. So can you see, oops, sorry, can you see my slide now in presentation mode, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So, and I will quickly go through some icons, and then we can furthermore discuss. So, you know, when asking the question, so what makes it important for us, you know, somehow to survive in academia or to survive in a challenging surrounding? Because I think only if you survive yourself, you are able to be an inclusive leader, and you are able to also have or display what we somehow expect from servant leadership styles. So one thing is certainly, whatever you do, you need to be totally passionate about it. You have to love what you do. So the passion is very important. At the same time, you need really to be, I mean, you must be very competent and also have very, very good skills in what you do, and basically reflect on what might still be necessary to improve your skills, improve your competence. This is something that only if you are honest to yourself, you need to figure out for yourself. So there is no one really, in my experience at least, really honestly telling you, you are not good in this, or you are very good in this. It's always, you know, a little bit through a filter. So really, we need to learn to be very honest to ourselves. In order to doing so, reflection and regeneration is very important, so that you really take yourself out of all this treadmill and running and hectic schedule, to really think about, what am I doing, and what is it that I want to basically contribute, and where am I right now? This is something that we only can basically decide and learn by ourselves. The next point that I would like to make is, we need to become rather independent of let's say, this craving for people clapping for us, you know, this basically, this, how shall I put it? So that we only feel confident if there are enough people applauding. Because one way of getting psychological control over you is to basically refrain from clapping whenever you need it. So you do something that is really great, and if the person basically wants to, in a way, get control over you, they might just say, okay, that's fine. So let's go next. So we really need to learn to know our own value, even if people do not, let's say, clap hands immediately. Happy to discuss with you further. I know it's a little bit difficult to explain. One thing that I like very much is so what I would see, the tree, because we heard from Tricia, the iceberg illusion, it goes a little bit towards the same direction. So obviously you have a part that is visible to everyone, and you have a part that is beneath the earth, so it's not visible. And we heard nicely from Tricia about success and what is underlying. what I would like to basically open the discussion with, every title, position, whatever, all the medals, papers, grants, whatever, this is something that is visible for everyone. And basically everyone can acknowledge that. The main thing, and this is why we really need to be very honest to ourselves, is, you know, our competences, our skills, our, let's say, passion about it, the communication skills, the leadership style, and so on. Because when the storm comes, and really, believe me, it will come, you know, so at least my biography, it came several times, right? When it comes, a lot of these things is gone, you know, it's just, the storm comes and it's not there anymore. And the only thing that will help you to basically rebuild that is everything that you have beneath the earth, which is your roots, basically. So the competence, the skills, your personality, your character, whatever, will eventually help you to restore everything that might be gone through a storm, you know? So this is why I think that's very important. The other thing, I think it's clear to a lot of people, there are so many different ways to basically to your goal. So whenever a door closes, we really need to know there will be another one opening. And then basically really, since thinking about the importance of empathy, I think everything that we need to be to have a lot of solidarity with each other and really be empathetic with each other, be it with our co-workers, be it with ourselves, be it with our colleagues, and really also nourish long-term friendships and relationships, because at the end of the day, this is something that will nourish really our inner self and will help us to basically move forward. And with that, I would stop here.
Thank you, Ghazaleh, for this overview of what it takes to make it, and then once one makes it, also be then inclusive for everyone. And I just took out that for you, one of the key messages, empathy is key to inclusive leadership. And I'm looking forward to later also asking about how do we make sure we are clapping for ourselves. But before we get there, I would like to invite our last panelist on stage to share his insight. And he's someone that I had the chance of working with for a long time in Heidelberg, and now Professor Dr. Carlos Romero-Nieto. Please, if you're in the call, mute yourself. And Julio, can you please mute the people that are speaking? Thank you. Sorry for that. So he did his training in chemistry at the University of Castilla-La Mancha, where he also did his PhD. Before then coming to Heidelberg, he had several postdoctoral stays, one in Canada, as well as one in Erlangen in Germany. And then he started his habilitation at the University of Heidelberg, where he received his habilitation in 2019 before becoming a professor at the University of Castilla-La Mancha in Spain. Carlos, please share your insights with us now.
So I will first start sharing my screen. Yes. Okay, can you see my presentation now?
It is still coming up. Let's see whether now it's there. Yes.
No? Okay. So yes, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. So it's like, thank you very much for this opportunity and this to be here in this magnificent audience. I have the very hard task to talk the last one, which is after these amazing talks, and then that we had from the rest of speakers, which are like, yeah, so very touching, at least from my side. So today I would like to talk a little bit about inclusion, but myself, it was not, but a personal perspective, a little bit about some concept about how I deal with the group, and then you as a future leaders. So I hope this can inspire you in some of the content. So inclusion is in this case is not just a checkbox. It's just a fundamental principle that about how we work, we can learn, and then how we treat one another in academic and also in scientific environments. Well, actually, so my personal idea is actually rather simple. So in my research group, so I don't see men, women, different religions, different sexual orientation. I see co-workers. That's it. So everyone in my group is treated with the same respect, has the same responsibility, and deserve the same opportunities, equal rights, and equal duties to know more and know less. So it may sound basic, but I believe that this way of thinking is actually essential if you want to build truly collaborative, productive, and inspirational environment. So if someone joins my labs, so what matters is not where you come from, who you pray to, or who you love. It matters your motivation, the curiosity, and the commitment of doing good science, and of course the willingness to grow and help others to grow too as well. So inclusion for me is basically about equity. So it's about making sure that every person has the same starting point, the same support to reach their particular goals. But it's not. But we have to be clear, at least from my perspective, that it's not about lowering standard. It's about recognizing that people bring different strengths and sometimes different challenges too. And we as mentors have the responsibility to respond to all those challenges as well with fairness and humanity. So in my view, humanity, in my view, actually, so universities and research centers, so are supposed to be places where ideas are challenged and expanded, where people come to grow intellectually and personally. But if we let discrimination, bias, or even sometimes silence, something that is also quite important within our institution, so we will be failing in our mission to create a better society. The point here is like, how can we claim to prepare future scientists, engineers, and professionals if we allow some to feel uncomfortable, invisible, or even sometimes unsafe? It is clear that excellence in science cannot be achieved if we exclude part of the population, because talent is everywhere. It does not depend on the postcode, the sexual orientation, the color of skin, or even the religion. In my opinion, so the inclusions also means something that is very important to realize is that to recognize how the diversity, to recognize the diversity in how people learn, they communicate, and develop. Not every student learns in the same pace. Some may be brilliant thinkers. For example, there's some other needs to some help in how to write documents. Some other have some more problems in presentation, some inconfidence. But it's important to consider that those are important factors. But also there are some others that are quite important. As for example, they can be carrying invisible burdens, as we have already heard of some anxieties, and then learning differences and even family pressures, something that is, in my opinion, increasing in the last years. That's why I believe, this is my personal opinion, that education and mentorship should be actually personalized and as personalized as possible. So I try, so myself, what I do is I try to identify the individual needs to the people from my group and help them to grow in the particular aspect they need the most. Some person might need some weekly feedback. Some other, they benefit from practicing a little bit. They talk, and some other even need some just quiet moment just to get through the moment. So, of course, this is something that requires a lot of effort. It's not easy, and of course, I'm definitely not perfect. But I try to create a space where people can talk about their struggles, and where mistakes is, of course, is something that will happen, is a part also of the process, and where the feedback can be given to every group members or constructively. In this case, so the lab culture is something quite important to remark. The lab culture cannot be built by accident. It is shaped by what you as a future leaders will tolerate and encourage. So it's important to be direct, ambitious, but also supportive. It's key, of course, also to respect boundaries, but of course, being open to feedback for improvement. None of us are perfect, and then we all have like some range, some room for improvement. So everyone, regardless of the title, doesn't matter if they're a postdoc or a PhD student or even undergrad student, should always treat each other with dignity and respect. So as such, inclusion is not a luxury. So it's not something that we should add in our group if we have time. It's just the foundation, in my opinion, is the foundation of a healthy research environment. So when we feel supported, we all work better. we all feel much more comfortable, and we take much more initiative because, of course, we are free to behave as we are. We can bring, of course, and then this at the end, as a group, this bring the full talent on the table to the group. So at the end, if as mentors and also as a scientist, we can work to provide a better environment, scientific environment. So independently, of course, from origin, from gender, sexual orientation or religion, this, of course, at the end, so they will lead to better science, better future, and of course, at the end, so better society. So this is a little bit the message I wanted to give you to all of you today. And with this, I can finish my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very outstanding equation, Carlos, here at the end. And with this, we're coming already to the end of the impulses of our 4 panelists. And let us quickly wrap this up. We came from very, very personal stories sharing about mental issues, about caring and care work, about how we need to empower ourselves, to empower others, that inclusion is not a luxury, but it's a basic right. And please feel free to already now put in all your questions, and the first ones are already coming in. As a panel, we have one question we have prepared that we would like to share with our panelists first, and that is, and Tricia, you already went into that direction, as well as Dave, we're living in a world where the inclusive corridors are getting narrower and narrower, and now it doesn't always have to be the big thing to fight this, but in the end, it's many, many small little things we need to do, each and every one of us at every career level, to keep and push these boundaries open again. And I would like to get your insight, dear Tricia, Ghazaleh, Carlos, and Dave. What can every one of us do to keep these inclusive corridors open?
Okay, I'll go first, I guess. It is a strange time to be alive, isn't it? I mean, I think that our conversation, if we had done this last fall, would be very different. I think that we just need to be really strong. And you know what? We're doing that kind of DEI work already required that. And so we're going to need each other more than ever. And foster these connections, having webinars like this, telling our stories. This is how we create our community, and we make sure that it's robust. And we just keep going. I don't have any answers. I'm just like in survival mode at the moment.
Yeah, probably I just add to that. So I think we should use our voice. I mean, we all have a voice, right? And of course, the corridor is getting narrow. Let's reflect a little bit on that. It means that if you stand by your values, it might get uncomfortable. But this is what integrity is about. And I think it's even more important to really practice integrity and really speak up when something is going wrong. I think all of us have quite a common sense of how the world should be and how we should treat each other. And I can tell you, in my environment, I also see, different contexts, things going wrong. And then it's really tragic to see that there is almost no one speaking up, or always, the same people. So what I would basically try to suggest here, don't be afraid to use your voice, or put it the other way around. We must use our voice. We have one, and it's not a luxury to use it, but it's a necessity. And it's a also citizens' responsibility. So not only as a scientist, but as a person who is a member of a society, you must use your voice. And then I think if enough people do that, and then reach out to each other, and then really help each other, then at the end of the day, of course, it will get uncomfortable. It might even become difficult and challenging, but then we can overcome that challenge together. But there is no alternative to that.
Yeah, and I'd build on what Ghazaleh says, and also say, using your voice to support other people who have spoken out. so that that individual who speaks out on an issue isn't a lone voice, even if it's simply to say, I agree, or to amplify that voice, or to share what they've said, is extremely powerful. And I also think that the bigger picture, like at a sort of political level, I hinted at this in what I said before, but things won't be won by statistics or data or reasoned arguments. It'll be won by personal arguments, where people hear somebody's personal story and it resonates with them. They think that could have been me, that could have been my child, that could have been my mom, and how awful their life is, and that's not right. And that's how things will change. It's through those kind of personal things. And when people do that, simply saying, I hear you, or I stand with you, or I agree, or sharing that is quite powerful in making those personal stories go further.
Yeah, so I will add a few comments on this, and then for me there is a concept that is quite clear, is that society will only change whenever the individual will change. So basically any small change that we do in our surrounding, in this case in the environment, in the laboratory environment and so on. So how we tolerate the people who are around us. So this is already a big step. We need to understand that in institution for higher education, and then also in other different levels. So we are all there for learning and to grow, and then, but not only in the let's say in academic way, but also learn to tolerate, and learn also that that basically, so we should all have the same opportunities, and same duties as well. No matter if you are a woman, no matter if you're a man, where you're coming from, anyone. So this kind of simple concept and so on, extrapolated to the society, this is finally something that brings a big change. So we are not, so when we are younger, and I speak by myself, for myself, so we do not realize how much you can change just by talking and just all the people that surround you, for example. So these small changes at the end, so they influence and have a big impact in the younger generation, and then you can see this over the years. There is something that has been already said as well, and it's something that is the silence. The silence. We all have a voice, and our voice is the most valuable thing that we all have. And then if you are just with the silence, you are tolerating bad behavior. And then you always have to speak up. We all have an opinion about what is going on around us. And then, so I really encourage you to always speak up with things that you see wrong around you.
Thank you so much for your insights. And let me summarize this. I think we can summarize this in 2 sentences. Be the change you want to see in the world. And if you cannot be that change, support all the others that are pushing forward to changing. And I think this is really an important moment to realize that we are over 40 people in this call, and it takes one person every single day, a little step to really change the world. And we're already 40. And I think this is really empowering if we think about that there are people around us who have the same ideas and want to make this world more inclusive. And with that, I would like to hand over to our audience and already read the first couple of questions before Carlos wants to share his question, I think, via microphone. And the first one is directed to you, Tricia, and it's from Pilar saying, thank you, Tricia, for your presentation. I do have a question. According to your experience, which mechanisms, changes could be introduced to realistically help those people that are currently developing their career to struggle less?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's one that I when I give presentations on this, it's the most common question. It comes from younger, early career researchers saying, you know, what can we do? And we're a part of this system where, you know, there are these kind of expectations enforced on us, and I do think that the system needs to change. I don't think it's going to be happen in my lifetime. I hope to contribute to it. But I think I would just go back to just the discussion we just had, doing what you can, and if you can't, supporting people who do, finding your network. I found my network of like-minded people really late in my career. It would have changed my life if I had been able to do that earlier and able to receive that earlier in my career. So, finding people who support you, attending these kinds of, events, it gives you some strength. I'll just share that every year I go to our national chemistry conference in Canada, and I have a group of people who work with me and who are, support these kinds of efforts. And that's enough to get me through another year of working on it, having time with them and feeling that joy. So that's just my best advice.
So in here, I would like to add something in here, and then this is my personal opinion. Something that I would have told myself in the past, and it's just like pay much more attention to myself, I would say. So it's like pay much more attention to the emotional intelligence. So you will get educated in chemistry, you will get educated, you will have a lot of knowledge and so on, but no one will educate you in how to deal with people, how to deal with stress, how to deal with problems, and so on. This you will have to learn by yourself. And then this will come after the postdoc when you are 30 or 27 or whatever. And then this is something that, of course, so imagine if you have to deal with all these very important aspects, and plus some other things related with your life, partners, children, or whatever, this can become something quite big. In my opinion, so the statistics are pointing in that direction. So these struggles are going to increase progressively as the society, so in the following years. And then this will only change whenever we will just change a little bit more the focus in earlier stages on change the focus on emotional intelligence. So a little bit more. So.
And would you mind if I shared one slide just on this topic? It just, I don't want to take up too much time, but
I think this is really good because the next question is kind of already going into this direction. So what can we as young scientists do to change? So thank you.
Carlos's comment on emotional intelligence really made me think about this part of something that I present, which is how therapy has influenced my academic path, my academic work, and this idea of emotional intelligence. And so in the therapy that I've had, which is called dialectical behavioral therapy, it's based on this idea that we have our rational mind, which we as scientists love that part, and rely on logic, experience, statistics, facts, and then we have our emotional mind, which is feelings, where we experience our emotions, stress, anxiety, and we all have both of these. And personally, for me, I tried to suppress my emotional mind and rely on my rational mind and be scientific. And as Dave said, that's not a good way to do things. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. But in this kind of therapy, what we will try to do is to access both parts and be our whole selves. And I think this is something that we can all do as individuals. And when we do that, we access what we call the wise mind, which is you're using logic, but you're also accessing your feelings. It allows you to be empathetic, as Ghazaleh said, as being that being so important, being able to be your authentic self, have clarity. And then, this kind of leads to different things, right? You can regulate your emotions. For me, that was very important. Also, if you can regulate your emotions, you can tolerate distress, which is important, especially in research and in our lives, as we've heard. And that kind of fosters open curiosity towards many things and finding your own way. And I think that is the mission of all of us, and how we can contribute is just by being ourselves. But really, it takes work to be yourself sometimes. And I just wanted to add that. And I'm going to stop sharing now, and so we can have time for other questions.
Thank you very much for sharing these answers. And I think the next one is going a little bit into that direction as well. So Mike is saying, thank you for your insights. Now, from the perspective as you leaders, What do you think younger researchers should do to drive change in individual setting or more broadly towards leadership, inclusive leadership from bottom up? I'm thinking especially of researchers who are in particular stressful or even toxic environments for diverse reasons.
So one of the things that I wanted to mention here is that there is a combination of top-down and bottom-up things that's useful here. So you can set up structures top-down that try and mitigate against this. One of the big problems in science is you have a leader of a group who creates a toxic environment, and everybody within that group simply experiences that toxic environment. But if from the top down, you've set up a department that says every individual has an independent supervisor who's from somewhere completely different in the department, who has an overview of what's going on in their PhD or their postdoctoral research, and who can give input into the process, then that's somebody the student can turn to and say, I'm concerned about this in my research group. I feel that this is happening that's not appropriate. And it can be dealt with in a different line to going through the main supervisor. If that's not present top down in your institute, if you just have a supervisor who has total power over you and you have nowhere to appeal to, then from the bottom up, ask the people that organize your graduate school, why don't we have somebody independent who we can turn to when there's a problem? Why isn't there a counselor in the department who we can talk to things about if we're having personal difficulties? You can advocate for those things. They're perfectly reasonable things to ask for through graduate student committees or to the administrative teams. You don't have to be an activist waving a banner to do these things. Get together a small group of people who feel the same, who want to advocate for that different system that might have some other advocate in it. If you're particularly bold and brave, you can be the person that advocates for things yourself. We had a trans student a few years ago, a trans man, who said, look, the way genetics is taught in the department is very trans exclusive. You teach XX is female, XY is male, females have babies, this is how genetics is passed on, and so on and so forth. And there was no thought for the trans experience within that. They said, I'm a trans man, but I'm quite expecting I might have a baby at some point. So how do I get folded into that experience of what you're teaching? They raised that themselves as an issue, and we slightly changed the way we introduce gender and sex within our genetics teaching, okay? So people will listen to you. It's about finding the right place to go to ask the right question, finding allies amongst other people at your career stage to make that ask. And that's how you can begin to transform if you're in a toxic top-down environment. And there will be allies at the top of the department who want to drive change. Find who they are, connect with them, and they will need you to drive the change, and you need them to drive the change. So try and bring it together like that.
Thank you very much, Dave. And with that, I would like to invite you, Carlos, to unmute yourself for your question.
So, hello everyone, can you hear me? Yes? Okay, so thank you for your presentations. My name is Carlos, I'm from Brazil, and I currently work with Julio Terra. Hi, Julio, at EDI, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion here in IYCN. So, my question is for all presenters. What is, in your experience, and of course, in your opinion, the top advice for those starting their careers? Just in one sentence. For example, when I talk with my students or colleagues, I always say, walk with the wise and you will become wise. So I believe that relationships is so important. So in your opinion, and of course, in your experience, what is the top advice for those starting their careers? And thank you so much for your presentations.
Well, I can start. So for me, in my opinion, my top advice is there is something that is going to evolve in the years and so on. But the top advice when you start is try to have clear which will be the values and the rules in your group, so that everything can be fair, so understood by everyone, and everything can be fair for everyone, no matter where you come from, your origin, whatever. And then this will already facilitate, let's say, the inclusivity. If you don't have, if you start improvising, because, well, I remember when I started with my group, if you start just improvising some of the aspects and so on, this will lead finally to troubles with your co-workers. So this is one aspect that I would really suggest to consider at the beginning.
With this, I would go on to the next two questions to still fit this within the time. Thank you, Carlos, for asking your question. And then I think one really important aspect, we are now all talking about inclusive leadership, but Mike is asking, how is this acknowledged? Do you think that within the academic system, this is acknowledged enough? Or how should this be different? And may there be country changes? I mean, we have the UK, Canada, Spain, and Germany with us. So maybe you can share a little bit from your international experience.
Right, I mean, that's a very, very well taken question. And the diplomatic answer to that is it's getting better. Probably the more realistic answer is right now, the metrics that are meant to measure whether you are successful in the system or not, probably I'd rather have a different focus. Let's put it this way. It's not yet considered as equal as many other, let's say, performance indicators, which might be incentive towards achieving those performance indicators no matter what you do. So, but it's really, so the importance of culture and the importance of inclusion and diversity has also been basically outlined quite a lot, also by policymakers and decision makers, but it's not entirely in daily life that you can say that, okay, if someone tries to really stay true to values and principles and so on, and then there is a conflict coming, that one would say, okay, she or he was always, true to the values. So this is per se a good, basically good for her or good for him, at least in my experience, which again, closes the circle to don't make yourself dependent, whether they clap or not. So stay true to your values and try to, lead by example, and then hope that it will make an impact.
Thank you for opening the clapping aspect again. And with this, Ghazaleh, as the last question, I would actually ask you, is there anything you would like to share? Is there a way to clap for oneself? Should it be a personal mantra? Is it something you do in the shower? Is it something, how do we teach ourselves? And how do you teach your mentees to clap for themselves, and maybe for us all being present today to take this with us, in particular as a response to Sebastian? Dave, you already answered him, when you are in a difficult situation.
Probably starting with the last question first. If you're in a difficult situation, I mean, what for me was always the main important thing. I mean, it's the purpose that then matters. So why am I in this specific situation, in this lab, in this institution, in this whatever? And if the purpose is very strong and I have still the feeling that I am doing something that will help my purpose or will basically help me to achieve, my midterm goals, then you can basically bear a lot of challenges, right? And also bear a lot of difficulties. However, if the purpose is not there, I would not say that there is a necessity to basically be there, right? So I think that's one. And the second thing is, I think I like your question. So about the clapping for oneself, to be honest, I don't have a really good answer to that. So looking forward to see what the other speakers say. The only thing, try to integrate reflection and honesty to yourself, and then And then if you compare, let's say, so where am I today and where was I, don't know, 2 years ago or 10 years ago or 20 years ago, probably it becomes more evident. But I think it's a very personal thing. So I am, for my personality, I'm not a type of person that tends to clap a lot for myself somehow. And this is why I think I'm probably not the right person to give good advice on that. Only mentioning that it's important also to reflect on what you have already achieved and how much you have grown already, and then probably the clapping comes naturally. But looking forward, what Tricia, David, or Carlos have to say to that.
So, with respect to these two aspects of how to deal with difficult times and so on. So I try always to advise one thing is that you need to find your equilibrium, but not only when you have problems, but always. It means that this equilibrium can be reached. So in my case, it's like I have the bike therapy. So without the bike, I can get totally lost. So basically lose my mind, my motivation, so the stress really affects me. Some of the people just paint things, or some other people, they like dancing. So you really need to find something that compensates the stress that comes to you. Because why is that? Because the stress will always come to you, and then the problems will always come to you. Why? Because scientists, we are here to solve problems. So therefore, you expect the problem to solve them, right? This is one of the things. And then in the second aspect, how do we clap ourselves and so on? So I think I have tried in the years to have this kind of culture, even though it's getting more difficult in the last years. But is another kind of methodology that I try to follow is that always to try to celebrate whatever small achievement you have. Means that anything you get a paper submitted is a celebration. You have whatever direction is working is a celebration. You get a nice result is a celebration. You need to have awareness of what all the positive things that happen to you in a daily basis. Together with all the different aspects is kind of trying always to balance your emotional side, because it's the one who will always try to become your enemy sometimes in science. So.
Yeah, can I jump in? I've thought a lot. It sort of ties in with what we've been talking about the whole time. I've thought a lot about in my career is what is the definition of success, right? And what does it mean to me? And I think that that's an important sort of conversation to have with yourself. Clapping for yourself, it should be according to your definition of what your successes are. And I think we can broaden those definitions. And I see in the chat, you're going to be judged by the number of papers, and that is unfortunately true for a lot of granting agencies. It's changed. It's different in Canada. We do have a diversity, equity, and inclusion section in our grants that is evaluated equally to scientific merit and excellence of the researcher. So I hope that we keep that. But what is success? Like, really think about it, right? And it's like Carlos said, like submitting a paper, that is successful. It's hard to do, it might not get accepted. It might get desk rejected like a lot of mine do, but you did the work and you wrote it up, and that is something to celebrate. But also the other things that you do to contribute to making science better. I think that we can, that this really needs to be just broadened in compared to, traditionally what we've done.
With this, I would like to wrap up today's DEI IYCN webinar, and I really want to thank our outstanding speakers, Ghazaleh, Tricia, Dave, and Carlos, for so openly sharing about this topic that is dear to all of our hearts and so important to drive forward. Because there's one thing we need to remember. It takes all humans to make the world a better place. And when we exclude people, we're losing human capital. It's not only unfair, but it also really hurts us globally. And sometimes this is an important factor to underline. And with this, I would like to highlight again 2 things. First of all, we had over 40 attendees today, and this means 40 people that can take out this message and live it in their daily world. And this makes a difference for everyone, for your colleagues, for your co-workers, for your friends, your neighbors. Please feel free to share about this topic. And I also would like to announce another really exciting announcement, and that is this will not be our only event on inclusive leadership. We've actually had so many of our community reach out to us to really highlight that this is a topic they would like to discuss further. And even in the chat, we're getting personal messages from some of the attendees thanking you for panelists for sharing so openly that we're hosting another webinar on inclusive leadership in chemistry and beyond in November that will be announced in due time. And I encourage you all to share this and attend again. And with that, I want to thank you all for coming and sticking, even though we're over time. And again, join me in a digital applause for our amazing panelists, Ghazaleh, Tricia, Dave, and Carlos, without whom this would not have been possible. Thank you.
And thank you so much to Anna for really being the driving force for this webinar, for the great moderation. We really appreciate.
Yes, thank you everyone, and lovely to see you all. Look forward to see all of you in our next forum, next discussions. And please keep in touch with IYCN activities from our IYCN channels. Thank you so much.